Now, for more on those shifting global alliances, I'm joined by Dr. Natasha Kuhrt, a specialist on international peace and security from King's College in London. I'm also shortly going to be talking to France 24's Delano D'Souza about how a lurch in American foreign policy has shaken up the Indian-US economic alliance against China, leaving India little choice but to consider reversing its own strategy. But first of all, let me start with you, Dr. Kuhrt. Thank you so much for your time. When it
Hi.
comes to foreign relations, these two tectonic plates are well and truly shifting. And it seems the Chinese president is taking advantage of this. So just how worried should Western allies be about his push to turn the SCO into a much stronger alliance?
Mm. Um, well, I'd say that we need to be a little bit worried, but I think this is nothing particularly new, unless you've been hiding in a ditch. Basically, this is what China's been saying for a long time. And obviously, there's great symbolic value in the summit being held in China this year. And at the time, at a time just after India has been hit with these tariffs, and just after Putin has been in Washington with Trump, and so on. So obviously, there are a number of you know quite momentous events happening, but whether or not China can actually turn this particular moment to its advantage is another question.
And of course, being Labor Day in the US, we haven't heard anything coming out of
Mm.
the Trump administration. But do you think Washington is keeping a close eye on this?
I'm sure they are. I mean, let's not forget that the organization that we're talking about is not an organization like NATO. It's not a collective security mechanism, collective defense mechanism, what have you. It's a loose grouping of a number of different countries which have quite disparate interests and views on all sorts of regional and global issues. So, I don't think we can expect people to be speaking with one voice, but it serves as an umbrella to bring certain countries together, first and foremost Russia, China, the Central Asian states, and then later India and Pakistan were added. But actually, China was very wary about India entering that organization in the first place, and only agreed to that were Pakistan to be invited along too. And the organization is not really a security organization, as I said, in any sense, such as NATO. It doesn't have its own standing army and so on. So I think we should be wary of, making too much out of this. But at the same time, it provides a convenient forum for countries like China to make contact with all sorts of other countries that it might be more difficult to make contact with at other times. And obviously, one can have a number of bilateral meetings on the margins of these kinds of big summit meetings.
But just how strong are particularly those ties between Beijing and Moscow, given their rather rocky relationship in the past?
I think it's been quite a strong relationship now for some time. Gorbachev already and had begun rapprochement with China. So, in the past it was rocky, but we're talking about quite a long time ago. It's been, quite a robust relationship for a long time. Obviously, people would rather it were not quite so robust, but it is a robust relationship, which doesn't mean that, they see eye to eye on everything.
And with Iran and Belarus joining the SCO, is it
Mm.
also becoming a network for authoritarian leaders? Keeping in mind with what you're saying, it's not like it's a NATO alliance, it's more of a loose
Mm.
economic ties.
Yeah. Um, I mean, even economic ties shouldn't be overstated, really. Yeah, I mean, for a long time, people have talked about it as a league of authoritarian gentlemen, a club of dictators, and so on, because obviously four of the five Central Asian states are members as well, and they are, first and foremost, largely authoritarian countries. They are all against regime change, and so on. I mean, India obviously is an outlier. being the only democracy. Clearly, yeah, I mean, it's a useful forum in terms of bringing together like-minded countries. But, you have Egypt, you have Turkey, various other countries as well that are there. But can we also remember that Antonio Guterres is there attending? Also, the Secretary General of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. ASEAN has a very similar kind of approach in some ways, you could say, to the SCO, because it very much prioritizes the notion of non-interference in internal affairs, which is also the kind of which is also prioritized by the SCO. But I think you can also point to the fact that the SCO has remained silent on many issues, including Ukraine. At the same time, it hasn't, approved Russia's actions in Ukraine.
Well, I mean, I want to talk about other nations in that part of the world. For instance, my home country, Australia, South Korea, Japan, and others, who will certainly be looking at this gathering with a degree of concern, would they not?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, there isn't going to necessarily be any kind of formal security structure or actions. I mean, I don't think that we're seeing anything, particularly new here. Obviously, it sends a signal to certain countries. India, of course, being part of, the United States Indo-Pacific strategy to counter Chinese actions. India being part of the Quad. I think India isn't fully signed up to the norms that are promoted by the SCO, but it's a very convenient forum for India to talk to Central Asian states to discuss issues around counter-terrorism and so on. So there are certain regional issues as well, which I think we should remember are actually, regularly discussed at the forum.
At this point, I want to bring in my colleague, Delano D'Souza. The one truly fascinating thing about this organisation is the fact both Pakistan and India, who are both deadly foes, are now members. But in any case, just how much closer is India inching towards China?
Well, Annette, this rapprochement which we've seen between New Delhi and Beijing, in fact, began late last year when the two sides met to calm border tensions that had broken out a couple of years ago. Now, India remains wary of Beijing. Yes, it has been forced, as Dr. Kuhrt suggested, to shop around to look for new trading partners as those 50% tariffs from the U.S. Take effect. Now, with this SCO summit, as we've been saying, the Chinese president is trying to showcase essentially a new world order. And that's something that the Indian Prime Minister suggested earlier today. He said what's currently on offer doesn't take into account the aspirations of the Global South. Take a listen to what Modi said.
Keeping the aspirations of the Global South caged in an outdated framework is an injustice towards future generations. Multicolored dreams of the new generation cannot be telecast on black and white screen. The screen must be changed.
Now, we shouldn't underestimate the importance of Narendra Modi's visit to China for this SCO summit. Yesterday, he had a bilateral meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, and what came out of it was essentially positive. We had the Indian Prime Minister who called the meeting fruitful and said there was a positive momentum in relations, reiterating his commitment to cooperation based on mutual respect, mutual interest, and mutual sensitivity. This is Modi's first bilateral with Xi Jinping since 2018, and his first time in China in 7 years. So yes, it's very important, but we should also be cautious and not read too much into it in light of what is happening with the United States.
But where does this leave New Delhi's relationship with Washington?
it's been placed on very, very shaky ground. And essentially what Donald Trump has done is taken 30 years of the U.S. courting India and just tossed it out the window with what happened last week when India was essentially singled out for continuing to purchase Russian oil. We had the 25% tariff, which was already going to be slapped on India, but then 25% on top of that for India's continued purchases of Russian oil. Peter Navarro, who's the trade Donald Trump's trade man, essentially called the war in Ukraine Modi's war, so essentially singling out India. And what New Delhi is trying to do, Annette, is point out Washington's hypocrisy, because China buys more Russian oil. Turkey, a NATO member, also buys Russian oil, and they're not being slapped with these 25% tariffs. So Delhi's position for now is no confrontation, no capitulation, but they're open to conversation. But I don't know how much of the latter is true, because the German daily Frankfurter Allgemeine has reported that Narendra Modi has dodged 4 Trump phone calls recently. The last time these two leaders spoke was on the 17th of June, a month after that ceasefire agreement with Pakistan came into effect between India and Pakistan. And during that phone call, the New York Times is reporting Donald Trump told Modi that Pakistan was going to nominate him for the Nobel Prize. Modi bristled at that suggestion and then went on to correct him and remind him that Donald Trump played no role in brokering that ceasefire, and the ceasefire was reached between India and Pakistan, respectively. So it remains to be seen which side is going to blink first, because we must remember that these two men, Donald Trump, Narendra Modi, are strong men, and they're going to do what's in the best interest of their people. And domestic pressure is piling on Modi not to blink and to continue the fight. So we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to watch.
And Dr. Kuhrt, surely India's entry to the SCO potentially challenges Russian and Chinese domination over the association?
I don't think so. I mean, it's quite a long time now that India's been in the organisation, don't forget. I can't remember how long, but, probably a decade or nearly a decade. I don't really think that India has the kind of influence that it would need in order to do that. China is really the driving seat. China's the country that resolves to essentially turn this into an organization. It just began as confidence building measures around border negotiations, border demarcation with China, Russia, and Central Asia. So China is really the one in the driving seat. And I think quite a few countries have been concerned that China is now using this organization as a way to kind of push through the Belt and Road Initiative, and then also to hammer home its ideas around the Global Civilization Initiative and the Global Security Initiative. The Global Security Initiative, by the way, just started as a position paper on the war in Ukraine. So China is really accelerating its kind of development of all sorts of new ideas. I think we also, when we're talking about the Global South, need to bear in mind that China and India are to some extent kind of competitors for leadership of the Global South.
Dr. Kuhrt, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you and also Delano de Souza.